I'm also seeing a shift from a defensive mindset to a continuous assurance mindset where cybersecurity should be adaptable, it should be intelligent, and it should have a anticipatory element to it, that it can anticipate things if they do go bad.
This is KVCast.
As a primary target for ransomware campaigns,
is security and testing and performance and scalability.
Risk and compliance.
We can actually automate that.
take that data and use it.
Joining me now is Anshuman Sharma, Director, Cybersecurity Consulting at Verizon, and today we're discussing a critical infrastructure approach to cybersecurity. So Anshuman, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I've got a lot of questions. Obviously, critical infrastructure, depending on where you are in the world, it's a big topic at the moment. And it's a big topic in Australia, a big topic in the United States. But when people sort of think about critical infrastructure, what sort of comes up in their mind is, utilities or transport. But telecommunications really does underpin everything. So perhaps from your perspective, how is critical the role of telcos in maintaining national resilience?
Thank you for the question. And you are absolutely correct, because when we talk about critical infrastructure, some of the things that immediately come to people's mind is majorly nuclear, power, transportation, which basically impacts the day-to-day life. But seldom people realize that the backbone to everything is actually telecommunication network. Now, if I talk about specifically with regard to United States, the Department of Homeland Security and CISA, which is Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, here in the United States, they have identified 16 critical sectors which have been put under the critical infrastructures category. I may not be able to remember all of them. I have tried to, by inculcating how if something is not available impacts me as a person and then as a society. So here are some of them. It starts with the chemical, commercial facilities, which are majorly big stadiums where there may be presence of many people. Critical manufacturing, which can be steel, electronics. Dams, which also includes water and wastewater systems. Defense industrial base, which are basically the military systems that supplies military systems to the defense side. Emergency services, which includes law enforcement or 911. The energy sector, which also includes nuclear. Financial services, food and agriculture. Some of the government facilities, which are federal and state and local authorities. Healthcare and public health. Transportation. I think I may have covered most of them. Infrastructure technology, which is one of the most important ones. And on top of that, it's the telecommunication sector. Now, I will try to answer the question in few ways, that how and why telecommunication is, if not the most, but the most critical component when it comes to the cybersecurity ecosystem. So one is basically it acts as a backbone for the entire digital operations, whether we talk about banking, or cloud computing, e-commerce, any emergency services, they all rely on telecommunication network for their operations. So whether it is corporate operations, consumer services, right from mobile phone to mobile banking to healthcare to voice, data, broadband, all required at the backbone is the network communication, which basically is just provided by the telco. So any disruption can impact the downstream elements, which can trigger a cascading effect on that. And that is why I always say it is a backbone. I'll take a few examples to make things more clear that why I'm referring telecommunication as backbone. So if we talk about energy sector, which is majorly relying on ICS and SCADA systems, example of a utility industry where grid operators can monitor systems, they have a visibility, they can do a dispatch if there is any concern. And they are very well connected using telecommunication infrastructure, whether it is MPLS, 5G, or LTE. Now, any disruption on the telco side may result in blackouts, pipeline control loss, dispatches may not happen on timely basis. Grid operators can lose monitoring, which can result, if not a catastrophic event, but definitely a considerable incident. Coming to the other critical sector, which impacts us in our day-to-day life, it is the financial services. So whether it is payment systems, ATM, wire transfer, SWIFT systems, any failure to that will result in a financial chaos. And last but not the least, which I just want to use as an example, is transportation. So whether it is air, rail, or maritime, even roadways where it's well connected with, like here, I'm based out of New Jersey, so NJ Transit, these are all logistic systems which requires telco, whether it is for coordination or communication. booking tickets, and in some aspects is the GPS. So if there is a disruption on the telco network, it can cause travel delays and disruption, which basically causes economic slowdown, can cause supply chain bottlenecks. So that's one part of it, why telco should be considered as most important, being the backbone. The second point, which I would like to mention, is with regard to digital resilience in time of crisis. So when we talk about digital resilience in time of crisis, it is more to do, like, we all have faced COVID-19. And when we had faced COVID-19, it was immediately required that the workforce should work from home remotely. This would have not been possible if telcos were not there. If telcos were not there to provide those rapid disaster recovery or scalable bandwidth for remote work or redundancy and resiliency, this would have not been possible. And why only COVID-19? Any other crisis that happen, like wildfires happen, geopolitical tensions happen, or even including droids. And more or less, I think telecommunication has always tested over a period of time that they are resilient, they are reliable, and because of that, the communication is possible. The last part I would also say, which I actually like to say, is acting as a cyber sentinels or cyber guardians. The reason is the entire internet backbone is with the telco providers. So they have a massive amount of telemetry visibility, which when they have a close collaboration with the CERTs or any federal or government agencies, they can build that system to give early warnings, whether it is related to any nation state campaign or whether it is related to any phishing infrastructure or any lateral movement across the sector that can happen, or even early botnet activities. So in this hyper-connected world, telcos being the backbone stitches everything together. And if something has to go bad or a telco flatters, the ripple effects are immediate and profound. And that is why I believe it is definitely one of the most critical factor and requires a mind shift that people should start thinking in that line, that telcos are equally important as any other critical infrastructure.
So would you say nowadays with telco, for example, something goes down? I mean, we've seen this also in Australia, but equally, if we look at consumers for a moment, just to provide an example, people just are not patient. As soon as someone can't get any cell phone reception for a limited amount of time, people start getting angry. So you're seeing that from your perspective, there's more emphasis now on critical infrastructure, meaning telcos, have uptime has to be 100% of the time, because obviously now if people need to reach emergency services, people don't really have landlines in their house anymore. They have mobile cell phones. So what's now more the pressure, even on that consumer lens for a moment, to ensure that telecommunications really has that constant uptime?
So I will say that telcos are actually the nervous system of any nation. And when we talk about any critical infrastructure, I would always believe that it needs to support few things. And the most critical part is the national security part of it, the economic security and public welfare and safeguards. As you have rightly said, that people have not a lot of patience, that if they lose their cellular network, and specifically the newer and newer generation, that they rely on their cell network. As an individual, I rely on my cell network. Even if I'm going from my car, I have to do a navigation. I definitely rely on my phone. If it's not available and a productivity is lost, it causes a lot of concerns. Now, in the previous question, we discussed a lot on an energy crisis that can happen because of loss of telecommunication network, which is the loss of communication in ICS data. Healthcare, for example, there is a loss of record exchange that may not happen because telecommunication is not available. A person sitting in the operation theater where a doctor sitting somewhere else is performing a robotic surgery, I mean, it may not be possible if the network infrastructure has to go down for a telecommunication provider service. Simple thing as a 911 service may not be available because of dead cell phone network, or it basically happens if an telco experience an incident, which may not, I will not say catastrophic, but it is of a considerable severity. If that happens, then definitely there is a loss of productivity. Stock market can cripple. There is delayed in logistics and supply chains that can also happen. One of the most critical part, which I believe is even more important to manage, is when things do go bad, is the misinformation campaigns that flows. And these misinformation campaign can actually escalate this outage. It can relate to sometimes panic buying. We have seen some of the misinformation that floated during COVID-19 timeframes when there was panic buying, it can definitely have far-reaching implications. Now, when we say what kind of an impact it can have and how quickly it can cascade, it again depends. Some consumers may feel it immediate, but there may be some other workarounds that are available for them to access the network, because every telco getting impacted at the same time may not be the most likely situation. So each household may have a different telco provider. In the back end, they may be sharing some bit of an infrastructure. And if it gets impacted, the communication goes down. But the profound impact that can happen is also on the corporates, where if things have to go bad, the effect can be a ripple. It may, for some of the industries, may be immediate. For some of them, it may take certain bit of a time, because most, if not all, organizations do prepare for resiliency, do prepare for redundancy, and specifically those in the critical infrastructure space, they definitely take care of that. But that said and done, I believe that telcos are well prepared and they are aware of the importance and have invested heavily in layered defense and defense in depth. They have also worked on segmentation so that if things have to go wrong, they will be able to contain it to a specific portion rather than everything going down. And they have also spent a lot in recovery and response. So the initial shock of a telco-related incident may impact certain sectors, including users, quicker than the others. But with the resilience plan in place, with the coordination with government agencies, it ensures commitment and faster response. So real challenge, as per me, lies in protecting, not only in protecting network, but maintaining the public confidence and operational continuity. So a disruption may be fast, but the response may be even faster.
Okay, so there's a couple of things in there that I wanted to get into, which was interesting. So going back to the misinformation campaign, you mentioned panic buying, which was a big thing in Australia. Apparently it was toilet paper. We have no idea why. And that got global news. So going back to misinformation, what other things often starts to permeate out there online, would you say, is something that isn't accurate or aligned with the outage?
Apart from the panic buying, it can obviously false information that, the entire network has gone down, which some of the statements may not actually be real. It is social media campaigns that can work on. It can also mention that it is not only the telco that has been impacted, it's a fuel crisis happening. There are shortages of, I remember during the time of COVID-19, apart from toilet shortage, there were issues and discussions around egg shortages and baby formula. Misinformation, not only from a standpoint of panic buying, but it can also from a standpoint of that it goes in a direction where it is more of a psychological issues, where there is a fear of scarcity, there is a herd behavior. It can be an information vacuum when official communication actually is slow and rumors will fill up. And it can be, that this particular nation state actually has attacked and our entire infrastructure has crippled, which basically undermines and create issue with regard to public trust. It can create social unrest to an extent. It can disrupt economical stability as well. And it can very well be specifically targeted to a specific sector, where maybe food or pharma. So some of the important things that the government has to take care and the telecom infrastructure has to take care is real-time monitoring of these social media, because we are living in an information age and everything that's been tweeted travels faster than light. And the misinformation campaigns needs to be tackled. There has to be a rapid response communication to clarify those rumors immediately. And there has to be collaborative effort, not only from the government side, but also from the private sector. Organizations that are in the business of social media, they can suppress this false trend. They can help create more education by telling what is happening in reality. And these are some of the things which I feel can be on a side of misinformation, not only from a standpoint of panic buying, but can create a mass hysteria.
So the other thing that I want to ask you about, you said this can go very wrong for corporates. So tell me why.
Oh, yes. Like we took some of the examples, like let's take an example of finance. Any financial or insurance vertical, they rely on connectivity. When things do go bad, for example, I have to do a bit of a transaction. I cannot do that. I go to an ATM and ATM is out of service. I cannot withdraw money. I may have to pay someone in cash. Even the point of sale system, I'm go shopping. I cannot transact my card because the telco network is down. I cannot use an e-commerce website. I have to do some SWIFT transaction to someone in another part of the country. I cannot do that. So the entire credit card management industry or a debit card management industry, or at a high level can say a payment card industry, can cripple. Stock exchange, there are a lot of people who put money in stock exchanges. There can be a lot of panic. Something is not working for them. They don't know where their stocks are, and they are not able to utilize their money to put in the right stocks. So it can definitely, again, cause a lot of fear. It can definitely cause financial impact. In the beginning, I mentioned that the role of any critical infrastructure is not only on the national security and public safety, but on the economic security as well. So these corporates, and you take an example, there are multiple other corporates that may get impacted in a different way altogether. Like we use the example of healthcare, we use the example of transportation. So their effect can be different, but definitely there will be an profound impact.
Okay, so one of the things that's interesting to me, being a podcast journalist in this space, is you said before, like social unrest. We want to be able to engender confidence into people. Now, I know you're based in the United States, but recently in Australia, very large telco had an outage there. 4 people died as a result of it. 4 people died because they couldn't use their phone. I'm using this as an example. I mean, we're in 2025, and if I was in a state where I couldn't contact emergency services, and I know that whilst people care and all of these sort of things, but what really is happening to make sure it can't happen? I mean, this is a phone. This isn't something that is, some high-level technology. Like, this is pretty basic sort of stuff. Like, we're not in the 1800s anymore. So the part that's getting me a little bit is big corporates come out and say, hey, I really care about this, but then there's an incident that happens. And whilst the intention may be there, it's still happening. I mean, I worked in a bank and security. One thing, we can give people money back. I can't give someone's life back. So I'm really curious to understand, because I think this is what is eroding trust. Whether it's in Australia, USA, I think that people are losing trust because they're seeing these sort of incidents happen right around the globe. And there is a very high chance things like that can happen in the US. So I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on it. And I'm using that as an example because that was recent. This wasn't years and years and years ago. So these things still are happening. And I think people are fed up and they're over it. And I think that as a result, they are really off telecommunication providers.
Yeah, I definitely can resonate to that because Verizon, we do have our operations, not only from the telecommunication side, but also from the consulting side of in Australia. And definitely we did hear that. And obviously it was really unfortunate that people have to die because they were not able to use the emergency services when they were needed the most. Now, what is happening that we are seeing that there is a shift specifically when we talk about critical infrastructure security. There is a shift for being not just trying to do a risk reduction or doing bringing something to an acceptable risk, but more and more to do with mission assurance. And why I use the word mission assurance is, again, going back to the same 3 things that I mentioned, that it's all about the national interest, the economic stability, and public security and safety. So mission assurance, that we assure that if things do go wrong, it will not going to have a ripple effect and everything is not going to go down. I think most of the telcos are now prioritizing resilience over convenience. It has been then in the DNA of the telcos to be resilient, to be redundant, but there is a lot more focus to ensure that mission assurance statements that telcos have. In most of the critical infrastructure, cybersecurity now is not negotiable. If we talk about any large corporates, they majorly within the CIA triads, which is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The major large focus for corporates has always been on confidentiality and integrity. But for critical infrastructure like telcos, it is the availability and public safety. Now, with that in mind, many telcos have a mindset that they will be targeted and things can go bad and they can be breached. So rather than having a mindset of what is my return on investment in the 5G spectrum or any other thing that a telco has done, the focus now is more on critical infrastructure fail-safe and the operational redundancy and to contain things as fast as possible. So there is a cultural shift, and knowing that the impact of the critical infrastructure can impact human lives. No more there is an approach on how to prevent breaches, but how can we get the operations up and running if a breach is going to happen, and topmost regard to safety and security of human. So a lot more is being done on making sure that everything doesn't cripple. I think there are tabletop exercises being carried out. Like if you talk about large corporates, it is majorly within their own teams or possibly with some of their providers. They may also engage insurance services. But with critical infrastructure providers as telco, they are engaging with government agencies because they may also have a role. We talked about mass hysteria, we talk about panic buying, we talk about misinformation. There is a lot more role from the government side of it. So having those exercises performed in collaboration with the government is being taken care, and it's being taken care very seriously now. So the focus is on building resiliency in the system, having network pathways to services, and other technical controls that have been implemented to limit the impact. So which can be like, if I really have to put in terms of critical infrastructure, they are really relying on air-gapped access control. They are relying on multi-factor authentication with biometric fallback. So they have to ensure that if one thing has undergo a technical failure, it should not bring everything to its knees. So many things being done, but as I mentioned, the key part to the question is mission assurance, and there is a shift rather just doing a risk reduction or accepting certain risk.
I'm known for being direct. Let's be honest. Nobody gets into technology leadership for the compliance paperwork headache. But if you're building or scaling a tech company, security frameworks like ISO 27001, SOC 2, Essential 8, CPS 234, or GDPR aren't just tick box exercises. They are business critical. That's where Vanta comes in. Vanta automates up to 90% of the work for security and compliance, helping you get audit ready in weeks, not months. It integrates seamlessly with your tech stack so you can spend less time chasing documentation and more time leading innovation. If you're a CTO, CISO, or head of security, it's worth taking a closer look. Visit vanta.com/KBcast. VANTA.com/KBcast to learn more. So I guess this is a good precursor to maybe my next question. How quickly can things start to really go downhill? So for example, we've just explained someone can't call emergency services, death could be an option, right? The other thing that I want to explore, and I have spoken to people on this show about how quickly things start to just spiral out of control. And in Australia, our supermarkets are considered critical infrastructure. So, and people can't eat. I get really hangry, right? So it's like, if I can't purchase something and I have no food in my house, people are going to start getting real angry, agitated, like chaos is going to start to get unleashed. So I'm keen to maybe walk through, just say a high level timeline, telco, something's happened, doesn't work. How quickly are the flow on effects? What does that look like then in your eyes? Like play out a little bit of a scenario just so we can give people this is what could happen if cyber breach were to occur, telco gets impacted.
Yeah, so for a day-to-day perspective, if a telco has to be hit by a catastrophic or a major cyber event, it definitely will impact the cell phone network immediately, where the productivity and connectivity will be lost. It may or may not impact, because as I mentioned, telcos do build redundancy. So satellite communication may be working, may not be working, but they also have those segregations. So immediate impact will be the end users. The second layer of impact, which we can say can either go to critical infrastructure, where one of them may be electric grids. So if SCADA systems have to be, because they at the backbone, they are relying on the telecommunication network. And if something has to go bad with the telecommunication, the electric grid may be the second in line which get impacted. So loss of electricity, loss of power can be the next one. And then if we go and move on to hours, because many other corporates, they may have plans which is more to do with their own resiliency, where they may shift to some manual procedures. So they may start to realize the impact that goes next to hours. So for example, another critical infrastructure component that may start to see that impact is water treatment systems. So if again the network goes down, those water treatment systems which have been controlled remotely from a site may get impacted, and they may take some time for the people be on site and start those manual operations. If we talk about large corporates, they again may have some backup, but they will start feeling the impact in the next few hours. compared to, because they may move back on the manual way of operations. Like we had an incident where an airline there in the public news that because of one supply chain push that has happened onto the system, there was failure across the industry. So airline eventually resorted to doing manual ticketing. But again, the problem was not only that, they have to also give the routes and the information about the flight path and everything all on manual basis. So they felt the impact immediately, but the really repercussion happens over a few hours. And then it goes from days to week where it can start impacting normal day-to-day operations, where it can start impacting the food industry because we do not have a mechanism for doing the communication for transportation, that where is that truck which has that food. We have already talked about the power grids, the energy sector, which may show immediate impact. The emergency services obviously will be impacted immediately, but they may again resort to some bit of, if not telco is not possible, they may resort to some manual ways of doing. So this definitely is going to have a ripple effect that goes across. Healthcare obviously is definitely key. I did take an example that if there is some remote surgery plan, now is it like it's a life and death situation, or that can be postponed, or is it like some medicines can be given to this person to postpone these surgeries? But in certain critical scenarios, it cannot be avoided at all. So from minutes to hours to days, that's how the impact goes. But some of the critical services will definitely get impacted in the first few hours. If we are talking about not a minor incident, but an incident which is of a catastrophic nature, which possibly bring not one, but couple of telcos to its knees. So that's how I see that various infrastructures, corporates, humans, public will get impacted. And that's the timeline that I can draw.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So going back to water. So for example, you said before they'll be able to intersect, right? Something starts to go wrong. So what I'm picking up from what you're saying, Anshuman, is we, as in everyday people, consumers, businesses, are putting a lot of trust now into these security teams, incident responders, for example. Someone isn't watching, or they're short on people, a lot of people go on vacation, something's happened. We either, not having enough people to spread the risk to make sure that someone captures it. We are putting a lot of trust now into these companies to make sure they do the right thing. So for example, something lights on fire, I call emergency services. Imagine if no one could come as a firefighter to put out a fire. That's just the example. That's the parallel I'm trying to draw to give people a bit of a visual. So because we have to rely on other businesses, right? I mean, look, if a telco goes down, I can't call someone. I can't do part of what I've got to do day to day, right? It impacts me. So how does this sort of trust go between different businesses, right? Because you can't operate nowadays just alone and self-contained. You do need to rely on other services. You mentioned before the airline, right? Of course, they have to leverage that sort of company to do certain things day to day, right? So we always are relying on our suppliers to do certain things. And I think that's something that was really important that you highlighted there, is how interdependent we all are nowadays. And one sort of thing goes wrong, there's a lot of impact. So I'm really keen to sort of get your thoughts on that.
Again, a very interesting question. And I do acknowledge that reliance on one industry can cripple others as well. Now, I'll try to answer this question in a way that it is not like this has not been perceived that these kind of threats can be real. And this can happen. It has happened in the past. I will not name any, but it has happened in the past. It's just a simple Google search will give the results. But I also believe that and I'm speaking from a telecommunication perspective, that the telecommunication are taking security and innovation both very seriously, that they have to coexist. Now, if we talk about very simple things, I think, and every aspect of our life, I think AI and machine learning has touched everything. Now, we are relying it to analyze larger set of data to automate certain tasks where we can remove the human element out of it. So it may be less prone to errors. The second important part is developing and relying on resiliency. I think most of the network operators, they rely on resiliency. Even large corporates itself, they are relying on different carrier altogether, that they are not relying on one telco. If my network has to go down and if only impacts one telco, the entire network should not go down because I have a parallel line coming from a different telecommunication provider. So resiliency, which I think the term which is very common these days being used, is the cyber resiliency and redundancy. Apart from that, there are strategies being designed with regard to diverse peering strategy, that my peering points should be different. Defense in depth. Again, what I'm talking about is all from a point of view that we, as telcos, they do understand that they may not be able to prevent everything, but there is a reliance that if things do have to go bad, everything should not come down to it knees. And I need to have an alternate path for communication, or some manual ways to do that thing. So interdependencies in this closed-knitted ecosystem is definitely there, and we definitely have a reliance to it. But I would say that the next gen connectivity, where we are moving to a mindset of secure by design and not just secure as a later fix, is being done. The systems that have been developed are being developed with resiliency in mind. And I think I've mentioned the word resiliency a few times because that is very, very important from a telecommunication perspective. And again, when we talk to corporates and they do have these scenarios practice that if I have to lose my connectivity, what are the way arounds that I have? So with the executive breach simulations that we witness or the tabletop exercises that we witness, these are the scenarios that are taken into consideration, and they have documented and defined their alternate pathways as part of their playbooks, that if things have to go south, what are my manual ways of doing things or alternate ways of doing things? So I think there is a lot more focus on that because, as you rightly said, if a human life is at risk, that should be the topmost criteria for any organization, specifically those who are working in the critical infrastructure sector.
Okay, so let's get into the AI piece. So you mentioned that before. So if we can eliminate humans with the intent that everything runs better, right? So if it's like human error, sometimes technology fails us, but the people have said a lot of it's still due to human error, whether it's fatigue, something's happened, whatever's gone on. So talk to me more about this, because yes, we're still going to need human beings to oversee and govern AI, etc. But do you think that this will help cure some of this problem if we remove humans, let AI do some of the heavy lifting? What are your thoughts then on that?
Oh, for sure. I'm a believer that AI will coexist with humans. It is not going to replace us completely, but wherever there is a human effort required, and it can be avoided, because I think one of the key things that we generally use is fatigue. So if there is a fatigue, that can result into an error. And I'll quote the Verizon DBR report here, that 60% of the data breaches that have happened in the last year, which is part of the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report 2025, human element has been there 60% of the breaches. So that means every 3 out of 5 breaches, there is a human element that is involved. Now, some of the things that AI can definitely replace, or I would say can augment, not to replace it totally, is majorly to do with proactive anomaly detection. So in order to identify that what's going bad within the network, because human intervention definitely takes a lot of time because it's a huge amount of data that can be analyzed. AI can definitely help us to define those patterns where an anomaly can be identified. Secondly, is automation of incident response. So if things do go bad, these are the few things that I can live with if the response is automated and may not require a human intervention to oversee. To a certain extent, is some of the systems that are being developed are self-healing systems. So if the things do go bad with those systems, they can self-heal. Again, it is no rocket science, but it is more to do with pattern recognition, that I know that if A, B, C, and D happen, this is the root cause, and I can configure the system to self-heal rather than requiring a human to interject. We are leveraging AI for acting as analyst to us with proactive incident response. So AI may not replace humans completely. In fact, I am a believer of that, but it will coexist along with human beings. So at least we can bring down the error part of it to a considerable extent, if not fully remediated. And obviously, earlier didn't have that huge amount of data to train our AI system models, but now we have that. We can definitely train them to take those logical decisions. We have been talking about agentic AI now, which can take decisions on its own for a defined outcome. So definitely there are those aspects from a human intervention can be removed where there is a probability of error, specifically where there is a fatigue or it's a possibility that a human can make an error where largely AI may not. But again, we cannot fully eliminate human out of it because AI is still in its very early stages. It is definitely a lot of advancements and a lot of things have been done with artificial intelligence and machine learning, but it's still in its very early stages. We have seen, and I can quote because it's a public news, that there was one of the big four that released a report where AI actually has a lot of citations which actually doesn't exist. So it started hallucinating. We don't want an AI system to start hallucinating in a critical infrastructure where it has been configured to take a critical decision. So I think at this moment, it is a coexistence. We will see how AI will roll over in future, but I'm a firm believer it has to go side by side. So the tedious task, the tasks that are fatigued, definitely can be taken care by AI, where if not eliminate, will reduce human effort to a considerable extent.
So you mentioned the words before, mission assurance. So if we start with that, so now with what you're saying, Anshuman, we can start to integrate more AI, yes, coexist, not replace, because the outcome should be, I don't want to keep hearing about someone died because they couldn't use a phone to get an emergency services. So the key thing for me in this space is, how are companies caring about cybersecurity? How are they progressing? How are they improving it? So that's the key mission. But would you say people see it that way? Because people are now getting agitated. Oh, well, my job is being displaced because of AI. But the mission is still, yes, we're going to put you elsewhere in the business. Again, we're not replacing you. But if AI means the removal of a human being because it's going to reduce a lot of issues, like someone dying, do you think people, as in people working in these businesses day to day, see it that way? Or are they only seeing it from, well, now my job's being displaced?
I think it's a combination of both, but I think it's a initial, look, whenever there is a newer technology that comes in, there is always some who will adapt to it early, some who will fear it. The thing that with AI is, if I go back in time, if we talk about when internet boom started, not all of us have the access to the internet. When cloud computing started or when computing power started, not all of us have the access to laptops or to work machines. But when AI came into picture, right from day one, we all have access to it. And we all have getting overwhelmed with the amount of things that AI can do. So for the word that I use as a mission assurance, it is majorly a guaranteed performance of critical operations, even when we are faced with cyber attacks. So we have to ensure that emergency services will work. There is a 911 call continuity, emergency broadcast alerts delivery happen, communication to first responders or military or hospitals can happen. There is a uptime that we can guarantee. But at this moment, people are actually really getting a lot overwhelmed with AI that, oh, it will take my job. Yes, the monotonous job will definitely be replaced. For example, we used to have jobs of SOC engineers who were just monitoring the alerts. I do not need that job anymore, where just somebody is just looking at the screen and just qualifying and quantifying based on the classification and severity. I can have a better, faster system which can do that, where I require a human intervention, where the incident now becomes a true positive. Now, once the incident actually becomes a true positive incident, that is where I require more and more human intervention. So those kind of monotonous jobs will definitely be replaced by AI. But at this moment, when I talk to people, when we talk to customers, there is a lot more concern with regard to AI. Is it going to take my job? Is it going to totally replace human altogether? I've seen articles that it may result in just a two-day work week for everyone, where humans may not be required to work. We do not know. We are not talking about the movie Terminator, Skynet for sure. But the monotonous jobs, the fatigue jobs definitely get replaced. And definitely where we talk about mission assurance, it has to be a larger role play on an automated basis. Obviously has to be under the supervision of a human, because I may not at this moment rely on a machine to taking decision on when things are related to critical infrastructure, because it has learned with data. It may not have that human touch capability, because we are still far off from the realization of AI to go to that level when it has sentiments of its own. It can understand the sentiments. I know there are research going on in that aspect where AI have some bit of a sentiments on its own. It can understand the sentiments of you, but it is all largely based on data. So sometimes the human element is definitely required, specifically where it is mission assurance or mission critical operations, it is required. But Again, I believe in the last that AI definitely is not going to replace human beings, but there has to be a push by each and every individual to make themselves AI aware, because AI is definitely not going to take your job, but a person who is equipped with the knowledge of how he can leverage AI to do or make his job faster will definitely going to replace the job.
So then, Anshuman, lastly, what would you like to leave our audience today? Any closing comments, final thoughts?
Yeah, the final thoughts, I believe that there is a lot that is happening with regard to telecommunication network. They are building systems with resiliency in mind. It is not just like that they are just there to make money and not to bother about human life. I'm also seeing a cybersecurity shift from a defensive mindset to a continuous assurance mindset, where cybersecurity should be adaptable, it should be intelligent, and it should have a anticipatory element to it, that it can anticipate things if they do go bad. So, for example, AI driven threat anticipation, not just detection. Security that can auto adjust based on behavior and risk, which basically continuously look out for my risk exposure and take actions on its own based on the behavior that or the pattern that it can recognize. The other part of it, obviously, on the mobile and the edge, like mobile phones that we are using these days are accessing sensitive data, and it's used for approvals. Edge computing is being used in factories and field devices. Now we are using AI for autonomous decision making to a certain degree. So visibility is definitely a concern, but it is not only on the data point, but also on the identity point. There is definitely a need for a unified policy enforcement, whether we have systems on-prem or on cloud, and machine-to-machine trust understanding. And the last part to it is, in fact, yesterday we released the Mobile Security Index report, and 85% of the organization have acknowledged that the mobile attacks are increasing. 34% fear that the increased volume of sophistication has gone high. But one thing which actually did not surprise me is the usage by the humans of AI not understanding the repercussions. So people downloading some important organization data and then feeding it to AI, either to summarize that data, or if I have data from the past 5 years worth of records of my customers and I really don't want to know what are the key target customers for me, and I'm feeding that information using my mobile device to AI, where this information going without even regard to that, this is happening. But many organizations are now putting more and more expenditure on mobile devices. And last but not the least, cybersecurity, specifically for the critical infrastructure, is definitely reshaping. We are seeing the geopolitical tension going on, which is definitely reshaping the cyber risk threat landscape. Cyber wars are going to be a part of global tensions. Definitely supply chain tempering. We can definitely and have seen firmware level companies getting impacted, so that the adversaries can not only just do an espionage, but can also do a long-term surveillance happening. I also foresee that regulatory will maintain a lot more stringent controls, specifically with regard to supply chain. So future cybersecurity with regard to critical infrastructure or even large corporates is not going to about building bigger walls, but smarter, intelligent, self-healing ecosystem which can adapt to changing factors, which is resilient, which is trustworthy, and for the corporates and even for the critical infrastructure, it can give a competitive advantage.
This is KBcast, the voice of cyber.
Thanks for tuning in. For more industry-leading news and thought-provoking articles, visit kbi.media to get access today.
This episode is brought to you by Mercsec, your smarter route to security talent. Mercsec's executive search has helped enterprise organizations find the right people from around the world since 2012. Their on-demand talent acquisition team helps startups and mid-sized businesses scale faster and more efficiently. Find out more at mercsec.com today.